So we come now to our final speaker on the panel, and it's a great pleasure to introduce Virginia Teehan, who's a member of this academy. She's Chief Executive of the Heritage Council. On her appointment to that position, she brought to bear a wide range of experiences in the Irish cultural sector, including art historian, archivist, writer, and director of various cultural institutions. Her paper today is entitled "The Space Between the Notes: Women's Voices Across Time."
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll just battle a little bit with the technology to get onto this presentation. I just move to the next slide. We're there. My grandmother lived outside history, and she died there, a 31-year-old woman with 5 daughters facing death in a hospital from her home. I doubt that anything around her mattered then. These are the words of the poet Evan Boland and can be found in her anthology, A Woman Without a Country. And many of us in this room can identify with Boland's words. Nell Halley, my grandmother, here on screen, lived outside history. Yet in her lifetime, Ireland had gone from oppression to upheaval, and she existed at the edge of it. Did she find her nation? Did it matter? And did she matter? But I recently found out that she herself made history, but none of us knew about it. Born in 1887 into the British Empire, she was a child of a Victorian world. Sent to a Dublin boarding school at age 10 from her home in County Kilkenny, she was educated by the Mercy Sisters in Baggot Street and then at the Royal University of Ireland. And she was awarded a degree in mathematics and French in 1907. Granny loved to tell the story that although she had a university degree, she never attended the university. Like many women at the time, she pursued her degree course through her school, as young ladies were not permitted to attend in the lecture halls. Her only personal engagement with the university buildings was to sit her exams in the Aula Maxima in Newman House. Yet she sailed through and emerged as a young woman seduced by the cultural revival. An early member of the Gaelic League, she took Irish classes and became a fluent Irish speaker. Like many others, she participated in plays on Irish themes and can be seen here in a wonderful Dún-Emer costume. The Gaelic League is recognised by historians as encouraging female participation. From the start, women filled prominent roles. Local notables such as Lady Gregory in Galway, Lady Esmond in County Wexford, and Mary Spring Rice in County Limerick were leading members. The Kilkenny branch, of which Granny was a member, was led by Lady Desert, an extraordinary reforming woman whose life deserves much more attention. At the annual National Convention in 1906, women were only elected to 7 of the 45 positions on the Gaelic League's executive. Maura de Butler, an active Leave member who is credited with suggesting to Arthur Griffith the term Sinn Féin, made it clear that women could make their contribution to the cultural revival without relinquishing their traditional roles. She wrote, "Let it be thoroughly understood that where Irish women are invited to take part in the language movement, they are not required to plunge into the vortex of public life. No, the work they can best do is work to be done in the home. Their mission is to make the homes of Ireland Irish." My grandmother's life took a very different turn to that domestic role suggested by Maura de Butler. Her Celtic revival dress was replaced by a revolver and holster. This is a photograph of her 1916 Luger revolver, and there's the maker's mark. Radicalised by the 1916-1920 political period, this genteel Edwardian graduate evolved into what appears to be a fairly trigger-happy member and president of her local Cumann branch. She and her sister-in-laws, seen in this photograph, became part of that band of female activists who, through their work as intelligence agents and couriers, enabled, literally in my family's case, their brothers and husbands to pursue the guerrilla warfare tactics of the IRA throughout the War of Independence and the Civil War. I'm a professionally trained archivist, and I have a good understanding and knowledge of how to go about genealogical research. Throughout my life, I was fully made aware of the role that my granduncles and my grandfather played during the revolutionary period, and indeed some of them were members of Dáil Éireann. My grandmother's role and her role in the military world only became known to me about 5 years ago. A local historian brought my attention to a pension application that she made for a military pension. I learned that Granny, like many of the Cumann women, fought for years to get their pensions, in her case 10 years. I was amazed to read the defiant letters that she wrote to the Department of Defence seeking her due, and I quote briefly from one of them written in 1941. Do you not think it splendid gallantry to let down the women who put aside their gay youth to face insult and injury from the occupying forces to help our brothers in arms? We stood in the gap, and unlike the men, we had few guns to defend ourselves, although she's lying there. You men ought to be proud of yourselves now. Where would you be without the women who supported you in the ditches all those years ago? And now you have your committees of power, and you defy the women folk of Ireland the rights and pensions that are their due. Your memories are short, and your loyalties are even shorter. My grandmother's letters bring us into the reality of the lives of so many whose names do not appear in our history books, but who were critical to shaping the republic that we inhabit today. We are also left with insights into how an alliance of political favouritism and institutional coldness brought rejection, hurt, bitterness to the hearts of so many families. Moreover, my family vignettes demonstrates the critical role that archival collections play in the development of an honest interrogation of a nation. Preserving the history of a nation is the noble goal of archives. It can sometimes seem like an abstract luxury, but actually it is very tangible and essential. Without evidence, there can be no history, and without history, we can't understand ourselves or chart a good course into the future. The cliched image of archival work as dusty, dull, and benign is a long way from the truth. Archivists are continuously making hard decisions at the sharp edges of politics and social change. And archivists are trained specifically to make decisions, day in, day out. What collections to acquire, what to keep, how to arrange collections, how to catalogue them, what to make accessible, and how. Recent thinking in archival training recognises that every individual brings their own bias to approach their work, and mistakes are made. And one of the recently acknowledged mistakes by archivists and historians relates to representation. Representation is a term now used to cover the fundamental archival skills of arrangement and description. there has been a paradigm shift in how archives are viewed. Rather than accepting the archival record as faithfully representing evidence of the past, there has been a move in recent years to interrogate the archival record as one that has gaps, silences, omissions, and some scholars go as far as to describe the symbolic extinction of certain groups in society through their omission from the archival record. If history is written by the victors, social history is written by those holding political or moral power. So the narrative of the church or state or respectable society is what is reflected in our records. In terms of women's representation in the archival record, there have been clear omissions in collecting in Irish institutions. This was initially uncovered by the likes of the Women's History Project, led by the wonderful Professor Luddy, if she's still here, and that was a wonderful talk this morning. And as she said, only by physically going around Ireland and surveying the vast numbers of records sitting, for example, in local authority buildings, were the team behind the project able to list the records that featured women. It wasn't the case that the records weren't catalogued. The issue was that they were originally catalogued, sometimes by men and sometimes by those who were not trained, in a very summary manner, listing the titles of record series, for example, the minutes of the County Board of Health or that magnificent Home Assistance series, but without explicitly highlighting the presence of women in the records. The original cataloguers did not consider it worth recording this series of records mainly contains information relating to women and their lives. Luddy's project brought many of these sources and related professional archival issues to light. The issue of representation is a topical subject in professional archival discussion, and I want to particularly thank my excellent colleague Lisa Shortall for bringing this to my attention. Practical steps to address this are being explored through the re-evaluation of the processes supporting core archival practices. And you will see there the recognition of these matters. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit ahead of myself in my slides. You see there the change. And it is very important that we address these issues and that the community of archivists continue to discuss these matters. When it comes to issues of selectivity in archives, what can we do to help? I think this seminar is a very important starting point because we need to encourage a wide conversation to better understand the nature of archival work, of how we collaborate with academic colleagues, and how the profession and archives and heritage can be supported. We need to understand what archivists do and the limits that they must observe. We must support actions that give archivists an explicit license and the necessary resources to continue to make difficult and informed decisions, to acquire and manage collections that serve the common good, not just somebody's good. The motivations to collect the legacies of others should not serve the interests of a select and sometimes powerful but vocal few. Archivists need to be protected from those with sectoral agendas. Only then will archivists feel safe to be transparent about what they are keeping, why they are keeping it, and the judgments they apply to put their holdings into proper contexts, and fighting for the resources to make them fully accessible. At the Heritage Council, we understand cultural heritage to be the interaction between people and inherited resources. In advocating for cultural heritage while simultaneously promoting the common good, we see a bigger picture and a range of forces coming into play as outlined on the slide. And what we need most is a proper nationally based network of archival services in Ireland. The Heritage Council has successfully advocated for the development of local authority archivists. The first local authority archivist was appointed in Cork in 1972. 51 years later, there are only 20 of the 31 local authorities in Ireland that have archival services. In contrast, 23 years ago, the Heritage Council established the Heritage Officer Programme. There are now 31 Heritage Officer posts across the local authorities in Ireland, one for every local authority. The development of a network of local authority archivists is a key objective of the Heritage Council, and I am delighted to say that we secured funding in our budget for 2024 to meet this objective and to work with colleagues in the local authorities to fund posts in counties that do not have archivists. This is great news for archives and for history and for heritage. Having secured this funding, my next task as CEO is to ensure that the funding is secure and sustainable and that it will be guaranteed to grow in future years. In my opening contribution today, I broke my own golden rule. I spoke about my personal history, which, if I'm honest, is a story of silence and concealment. And my story is in part every woman's story. There is a lot of noise about how the role of women might be acknowledged by society. Noise is not music. Music is often described as the space between the notes. It is time to animate that space, allow the notes to reverberate, and give women a full measure of their work. This story can be best understood through professional heritage practice and scholarship. Gurb Míle Maith Agaibh go léir.